Tiger on the prowl, I'ma make it go wild. I'm original, and I told you so. I'm a kid in the candy store, with the leather on the denim. I ain't the cure, I'm the venom. If you wanna find me, find the taillight. Something's coming in, you're gonna wanna take a red eye. It's time to go. It's time to go. Get ready. Get ready. Get ready. Don't blink, don't blink. Get ready. Get ready.
Good evening to all of you. You are at Ang Maestro, episode 234, here at the YouTube channel of the Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino. Our title for today is Mary Kay Cartoon, Philippines at Edge of Preemptive War. Mary Kay Cartoon. You know, I was a bit careful about approaching this particular episode because I know that there is a Mary Carlson who is a cartoonist, and this is one of her works. The Red Dot Gallery is located in the Georgian market town of Holt in North Norfolk in the eastern region of England. Red Dot features an ever-changing mix of original paintings and sculpture, along with limited editions. In addition, the gallery stocks decorative and eclectic wares for gifts and the home. And what is shown here is by Mary Carlson himself, an acrylic on canvas, image 40 by 30 inches. The price has been withheld and it has been sold. But we're not dealing here with a piece of art tonight, ladies and gentlemen. What we are really after is a statement from the U.S. envoy, China's 10-dash line, a cartoon, made in General Santos City on September 13, 2024. The United States Ambassador to the Philippines, Mary Kay Carlson, has branded China's 10-dash line to delineate its supposed maritime entitlements in the South China Sea as a cartoon. Now let us proceed with this slowly and play the tape portion by portion. Let's play the first video.
Today, we're diving into an eye-opening statement from the United States Ambassador to the Philippines, Mary Kay Carlson, who has just called China's infamous 10-dash line a cartoon. Yeah, you heard that right, a cartoon. This bold statement adds a new layer to the ongoing debate over the South China Sea, or as we call it, the West Philippine Sea. Let's break down what this means for the Philippines, international law, and the bigger geopolitical picture. 1. Background on the 10-dash line. For those unfamiliar with the issue, China has been pushing its so-called 10-dash line to justify its vast territorial claims over the South China Sea, including areas well within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, EEZ. The original claim, known as the 9-dash line, was already controversial, but now with the 10-dash line, it's getting even more bizarre. China insists that this imaginary line gives them the right to control resources, fishing grounds, and navigation in these waters, even though international law, including the 2016 Hague ruling, says otherwise.
According to Kishore Mabubani, an international figure and former senior officer in the United Nations, a Dutch line was drawn into the map of the South China Sea by a Japanese working for the Taipei office of the Formosa administration of the South China Sea. It is definitely not a cartoon. but an illustration reflecting the features that Japan had occupied before and during World War II. But after the surrender of Japan, the recovering forces of the Republic of China internally circulated an atlas in 1947, where a drawing of an 11-dash line indicated the geographical scope of its authority over the South China Sea. 2 dashes were removed from the 11-dash line in 1953 by the People's Republic of China when the territorial title for the Bac Long V Island, or the Gulf of Tonkin, was transferred from China to Vietnam. Here is the second video.
To Ambassador Carlson's statement. So what did Ambassador Carlson say? In a recent interview in General Santos City, she didn't hold back. When asked about China's insistence that the Philippines remove its vessels from the Escoda Shoal, Carlson straight up called China's 10-dash line a cartoon. She said, and I quote, "That's not based in law, that is not a factual representation of international maritime law." Essentially, she's calling out China for trying to rewrite the rules of the game.
Admittedly, the legal nature and meaning of the 9-dash line have become controversial with the effectivity of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea in 1994. Both the Declaration of the Government of the People's Republic of China on the Territorial Sea of 1958 and the Law of the People's Republic of China and the Contiguous Zone of 1992 expressly provides that the territory of the People's Republic of China includes, among others, the Dongsha Islands, the Xisha Islands, and the Nansha Islands, as well as the Paracel. All those acts affirm China's territorial integrity and the relevant maritime rights and interests in the South China Sea. If ever Carlson's statement adds a new layer in the ongoing debate over South China Seas, it does not help enlighten the issues. On the contrary, her frivolity exacerbates the confusion. She has only succeeded in further politicizing matters. Let us proceed to the third video count.
3. U.S. support for the Philippines. The big takeaway here is that the U.S. is standing firmly behind the Philippines. Carlson made it clear that the United States will continue to support the Philippines in upholding its sovereign rights under international law. The Escoda Shoal, which is just 75 nautical miles from Palawan, falls squarely within the Philippines' EEZ. Carlson emphasized that this is not just about national security, it's about the livelihoods of Filipino fishermen, their families, and even our food security. It's great to see this level of support from a key ally like the US.
China does not base its claims in the South China Sea on the 9-dash line as maps. It is common knowledge among students and practitioners, diplomats and professionals involved in international relations that maps do not constitute titles in international law. That's why I'm wondering what is the motivation behind so much emphasis on this 9-dash line. On the other hand, UNCLOS is just one treaty and cannot be construed to serve as the totality of international law, which is the sum total of all written treaties numbering more than 250,000 and customary traditions between and among nations. As a career diplomat, Carlson ought to know this, but instead she chose to megaphone Joe Biden and Blinken's rule-based order, the slogan for the U.S. hegemony and the planet. She has chosen intellectual dishonesty instead of diplomatic integrity. The American ambassador even lies about supporting the Philippines. The 9 U.S. EDCA bases were initially sold to the Filipino as preparations for human assistance and disaster response. How many super typhoons have passed? Recently, Karina and Enteng. Did we see any white or black gringos assisting? If we did not revive the Chinese protocol to resupply our marine stations at the BRP Sierra Battery, Attache and Shoal, they would have been dead by now due to starvation. We lost Escoda Shoal in 2012 when we unconditionally withdrew BRP Gregorio del Pilar from the shoal of Zambales. This month, we lost Escoda Shoal, and nearly 5 months of attempting to establish another forward operating base. There, we withdrew the BRP Teresa Magbanua with the embarrassing reason, quote, that the ships were compelled to return to port due to unfavorable weather conditions, depleted supplies of daily necessities, and the need to evacuate personnel requiring medical care. 4 of the crew disembarking from the ship were shown on television in stretchers due to dehydration. They said they ran out of food and water 2 days before their return, eating only porridge or lugaw for 3 weeks. In a translated statement, the Chinese Coast Guard said that the Magbanua has been illegally stranded at the Escoda Shoal, which Beijing calls Shanbing Reef, since April and had violated China's sovereignty and has undermined regional peace and stability. In short, we were trespassing. Miss Carlson, where is your much ballyhooed GI support? Let's go to video number 4.
Pushback. On the flip side, China isn't taking this lightly. Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Chen Xiaodong, during recent bilateral talks with the Philippines, reaffirmed China's stance, stating that they would firmly safeguard their claims in the South China Sea. China's narrative continues to be that their claims are rooted in history and are validated by their interpretation of international law, despite overwhelming evidence and a landmark ruling to the contrary.
There you go. On the basis of one treaty and on an arbitration. In an arbitration, the arbitral ruling only applies to the party participating. China did not participate, so Ambassador Carlson, apply your logic to the Philippines only. China's historic rights in the South China Sea is well documented in history. The Philippine claim only began in 1978. I will no longer go back earlier, but instead begin my statutory reconstruction in 1894, when Japan began invading Chinese territories that started the First Sino-Japanese War. China lost that war and ceded part of Manchuria, Taiwan, and the Pescadores in the Treaty of Shimonoseki. That did not stop the Japanese intrusions, however, rekindling the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937, which was overtaken by China's joining the Allied forces in the World War II. By that time, Japan had already occupied also Hainan, Pratas, Paracels, Spratleys, and the rest of the South China Seas reflected in the 11-dash line. In 1943, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Chiang Kai-shek met in Cairo, Egypt, and issued a declaration, quote, that territories stolen from China by Japan, including Manchuria, the island of Taiwan, and the Pescadore Islands, would be returned to Chinese sovereignty, unquote. Article 8 of the 1945 Potsdam Declaration stipulated that the terms of the Cairo Conference shall be carried out. After Japan surrendered, China could not be included in the 1951 Treaty of San Francisco because of an unresolved civil war. But then Japan complied with the Cairo and Potsdam conditions in its 1952 Treaty of Taipei with the Republic of China. The People's Republic of China officially became the Republic of China's successor in interest when the United Nations passed Resolution 2758, recognizing it as the only government of China, known as the One China policy, with Taiwan as its province. A year after, a communique establishing diplomatic relations between Japan and the People's Republic of China superseded the Treaty of Taipei. Relevant to our discussion here, the sovereignty over the South China Sea has since belonged to the People's Republic of China. This is history. These are historical facts backed up by treaties. These had to go through war, and therefore the cost is great. Let us go to the video number 5.
Why Carlson's statement matters. So, why does Carlson's statement calling China's claims a cartoon matter? First, it underlines the absurdity of China's narrative in a way that's accessible and relatable to the public. Describing the 10-dash line as a cartoon strips it of any perceived legitimacy and highlights just how far China is going to push its own agenda. More importantly, Carlson's remarks signal that the US isn't just a passive observer in this situation. They're actively challenging China's actions and affirming their commitment to the Philippines.
Given these historical facts that I have enumerated, how can Carlson's cartoon underline the absurdity, so-called absurdity, of China's preeminence in the South China Sea? How does her mere undiplomatic abuse of language strip China of legitimacy? However, I agree on the matter that the U.S. is not just a passive observer and that the Americans are challenging China's action, but in order to fake an iron commitment to the Philippines, in the words of President Joe Biden. Video number 6.
The bigger picture. Now, stepping back for a moment, this is all part of a larger geopolitical chess game. The South China Sea is a critical area for global trade, with billions of dollars worth of goods passing through these waters each year. Whoever controls these waters also controls a major global shipping route. That's why the US, along with other countries like Japan and Australia, is so invested in maintaining freedom of navigation here. It's not just about the Philippines, it's about upholding international law and maintaining balance in the region.
There is no freedom of navigation issue in the South China Sea, as the waters, despite China's sovereignty claims, have remained unimpeded. What China does not allow, however, is the principle of innocent passage marked down in UNCLOS. And if ever there are blatant violators, They are the US, Japan, and Australia, and even some European countries who persist in aiding the Philippines in fishing for a false flag encounter with Chinese law enforcement assets in the area in order to render China some reputational cost. Video number 7.
7. The Escoda Shoal and its importance. Let's talk a bit more about the Escoda Shoal. Carlson mentioned that this area is rich in marine resources, which makes it a crucial fishing ground for Filipinos. It's not just a political or territorial issue, it's about livelihoods and food security. If you're a fisherman in Palawan, this isn't just some far-off geopolitical conflict. This directly affects your ability to provide for your family. That's why defending our rights in the WPS isn't just a matter of pride, it's about survival.
One ploy used against China and to demonize China is that it prevents fishermen from Palawan from pursuing their livelihood. The same propaganda they sell in Zambales up north. This is horse pucky. What the fishermen are complaining about are the frequent military exercises that the armed forces of the Philippines conducts with these foreign countries. And now to the last video.
Conclusion. So what's next? Will China continue to push its cartoon claims? Or will international pressure finally force them to back down? One thing is clear, the Philippines isn't alone in this fight. With allies like the US standing by us, we have a solid chance to uphold our rights and protect our resources.
Depicting the situation in the South China Sea as a cartoon is unschooled, irresponsible, and dangerous. The United States is not even a member of UNCLOS, not a coastal stakeholder, and neither a claimant state. Yet, it is the noisiest intruder because it wants to establish its agile combat employment ACE military doctrine by setting up forward operating bases in the area. Momentarily, it has found a pawn in the Marcos administration in violation of our ASEAN treaties on neutrality and non-nuclear proliferation. Let us move on to the next slide. Carlson, part of the problem, not solution. She was invited to General Santos on Mindanao economic development issues, plans, programs, and possible support from the United States of America. And instead, she warbles at geopolitics. What is the sober solution to this impasse before it becomes the trigger for World War III? During the 2013 Law of the Seas Conference in Seoul, Professor Quen Chen Fu of Xiamen University expressed in his paper Global Challenge and the Freedom of Navigation his view that the issue of the Nine-Dash Line cannot be solved under UNCLOS, which has no provision regarding the historical rights except for Articles 10, parentheses 6 and 15. However, while UNCLOS establishes a legal framework to govern all uses of the oceans, its preamble provides that, quote, matters not regulated by this convention continue to be governed by the rules and principles of general international law. In the 2013 World Global Forum, Japanese professor Taisako Ekeshima pointed out, quote, the solution of the dispute over the South China Sea is not confined to the argument regarding a judgment on the legal meaning of the dash line that is issued within the framework of international law, but also entail a plan for maintaining peace and stability in the maritime area by eradicating the fundamental confrontational factors, including the territorial dispute, through peaceful means and cooperation among the states concerned. This is indicated in its China's dash line and South China Sea legal limits and future prospects, number 10, page 37. China and the ASEAN states parties should, through diplomatic negotiations, continue their effort to upgrade the 2002 Declaration of Conduct of States Concerned with the South China Sea, the DOC, which is a political document, to a Code of Conduct, COC, which should be a legally binding normative instrument. This is what, instead of cartoonizing or cartooning, Miss Carlson should be busying herself with if she were really true to her chosen profession. Unfortunately, it is not the policy of the United States to support such code of conduct, as it will greatly expose the utter irrelevance to the ASEAN state members of the American presence in the sub-region. The U.S. has been moving tooth and nails not only to delay the COC, but make sure it doesn't happen. This makes Ambassador Carlson the cartoon personified. And if I may get an advice for her from Maro Samonte, a columnist at the Manila Times, until now, America has not ratified the treaty, although it had been adopted by members of the United Nations way back in 1982 onwards. Why America refuses UNCLOS is not clear. Could it be because if America agrees to the treaty, it will be subject to the UNCLOS provision that only 200 nautical miles of the sea from the shores of a country, in this case California, Alaska, Hawaii, comprise its exclusive economic zone, while that of the United States intends to be its territories are the entire Pacific and Atlantic Ocean? That is a question that Maro Samonte asks that should teach a few lessons in history for the U.S. ambassador in the Philippines. Because this is more than just a 9-dash line in Barbie's motion picture. Let us show the slide. This is just more than Hollywood, Miss Ambassador. A lot of lives, a lot of countries depend on the 9-dash line. I was in General Santos City because I was requested by civil society for an explanation for the ambassador's visit. I was in the city, just as when Carlson was bad-mouthing China, conducting an anti-war caravan for the Mamamayan Ayaw sa Digmaan. Citizens says no to war, and I am that person in the circle. They are particularly afraid. The people of General Santos is particularly afraid of an invasion. But they could not reconcile invasion by China with what is on the reality, because none of our islands, none of our territory, land territory, is occupied by China. On the contrary, we have officially 9 sites for the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agency. So are we talking here about Chinese sleeper cells? Or are we talking about American occupation? By the way, the Americans are not only functioning in these 9 sites. According to the president's sister, Amy Marcos, they are in 16 other locations all over the country. Now, what is the implication of this? That the General Santos Civil Society wants a clarification on. It is because, ladies and gentlemen, of the introduction or the insertion of the Typhoon missile system in northern Luzon. This is a mid-range, intermediate capability missile. Let us play the video.
China threatens US with response to missile deployment in the Asia-Pacific region. Beijing has condemned Washington's deployment of intermediate-range missiles in the Asia-Pacific region and will take all effective measures to prevent the US from messing up the South China Sea, Chinese Defense Ministry spokesman Wu Qian said. His comments come after the US kicked off its largest joint exercise with the Philippines since the Cold War in the South China Sea earlier this week. The exercise, dubbed Paglinawan, is set to run through May the 10th and is said to involve over 11,000 US soldiers and 5,000 Philippine servicemen. A French frigate as well as troops from France and Australia are also participating in the event. Earlier this month, the US also held a separate 2-week round of exercises with the Philippines dubbed Salaknib 2024, during which it deployed SM-6 missiles capable of reaching Taiwan. The weapon has a maximum range of more than 400 kilometers, while a new medium-range MRC Typhoon land missile system is capable of launching from the Philippines island of Luzon. Asked to comment on the move, Wu stated that Beijing firmly opposes the deployment of such weapons by the US in the Asia-Pacific and stressed that such an action by Washington severely threatens the security of regional countries and undermines regional peace and stability. China will take resolute countermeasures. We hope the relevant country could refrain from opening the door to the devil, which will only end up hurting everyone, including itself, the spokesman said. Wu stated that China sees the strengthening diplomatic relations between the US and the Philippines as the two countries' business. However, he stressed that such relations must not harm China's or any other country's interests and must not undermine peace and stability in the region. China's military will continue to pay close attention to the situation in the region and will take all effective measures to respond effectively and will never allow relevant parties to mess up the South China Sea, Wu added.
The American presence in the Philippines started with 5 EDCA bases. And then it expanded to 4 more, totaling 9. The question here is, it has gone from HADR, HADR, Human Assistance and Disaster Response, to deterrence. And now, with the Typhoon weapon system, it has gone from deterrence or defensive purposes to offensive purposes. Why? Because the Typhoon missile weapon system is capable of launching the Tomahawk, a long-range, all-weather, jet-powered, low-altitude, subsonic cruise attack missile with diverse capacity. It's low-flying, from 30 to 50 meters. It might be slow, subsonic, at less than Mach 1, but it has superior geopositioning system that can melt with the typology or typography of the terrain. But the most damning is, number 1, it is capable of an operational range of 2,500 kilometers. and it's capable of being armed with a nuclear warhead. You will see on your right the radius at which the Tomahawk missile can operate, endangering Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Brunei in the south, endangering Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, Myanmar on the west, and China, North Korea on the north. This is China's reaction to the taking in of this offensive weaponry.
我们注意到有关报道，中导是极具冷战色彩的战略性进攻武器，本就不应该出现在本地区。美菲应言行一致，立即撤走并永不部署。近年来，美方在军控领域毁约退群，严重冲击国际军控与裁军进程，还把盟友伙伴绑上战车，制造紧张对立，破坏地区和平稳定。中方对此坚决反对。我们敦促美菲尊重地区国家人民求和平、谋发展的共同愿望，多做有利于地区和平稳定的事。
And this is from the Russian perspective.
Что США не только производят эти ракетные системы, но уже привозили их в Европу на учения, в Данию. И вот совсем недавно было объявлено, что они находятся на Филиппинах. Неизвестно при этом, вывезли они оттуда эти ракеты или нет. В любом случае, нам нужно на это реагировать и принять решение о том, что мы должны будем делать по этому направлению дальше. Судя по всему, нам нужно начать производство этих ударных систем и затем, исходя из реально складывающейся ситуации, принимать решение о том, где, если это потребуется для обеспечения нашей безопасности, их размещать.
There you go, from the Chinese and the Russian point of view. But where are we at right now? In the September 19, 2024 release of the Eurasian Times, the headline was, "Deadly U.S. missiles to remain in the Philippines indefinitely." The United States Army deployed its ground-based missile Typhoon in the Philippines in April 2024 to participate in the exercise Balikatan 24 and exercise Salaknim 24 amid heightened tensions between the Philippines and China. More than 4 months later, the lethal system has not been withdrawn. Providing clarity, the Philippine Army announced on September 17 that the Typhoon would remain indefinitely in the country. Colonel Reynaldo Balido Jr., Deputy Head of the Philippine Army and Head of the Public Affairs, said the system was still being used for military training by Filipino troops. The news agency Inquirer also reported. Balido further noted that the missile system would only be withdrawn after the U.S. and the Philippine governments make a decision. This is an utter contradiction of their announcement a few months ago that the facility will already be withdrawn this month of September. The system has been reportedly been stationed at an undisclosed location in northern Luzon, but a satellite check we will give later. This is the U.S. first such deployment in the Indo-Pacific region since the Cold War, especially on the first island chain in Asia. The deployment ended a nearly 40-year hiatus that followed the 1987 signing of the U.S.-Soviet Union Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. The treaty banned and barred the development and deployment of land-based missiles with a range of 500 to 5,500 kilometers. However, the U.S. withdrew from the treaty in 2019, citing alleged violations by Moscow and in response to China's expanding military prowess, notably in missile technology. According to some reports, General Romeo Browner Jr., the Philippines military chief, announced on August 29 that the military had begun training for the MRC operations in anticipation of the potential decision by the country to pursue the acquisition of such a missile system. That statement introduces a definite flexing out from its original intentions. The new update that while it was previously scheduled to be removed from the Philippines, as we said, this month of September, there has been a change in decision, obviously. The new update on the system follows shortly after the Philippines was compelled to withdraw a Coast Guard vessel from the contested Escoda Shoal amid rising tensions with Beijing. Now you know what the cartoon is all about and what this propaganda conditioning by Ambassador Carlson is all about. The United States is again in double speak, in contradiction of what it says with what it does. Now, we cannot afford this. So why are we preparing for it? Aha! The angle has to be established. All of a sudden, Japan buys hundreds of Tomahawk missiles from the United States. Associated Press reported on January 18, 2024, that Japan signed a deal with the United States to purchase up to 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles as part of its ongoing military build-up in response to increased regional threats. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's government has pledged to double its annual defense spending to about 10 trillion yen, US 68 billion, by 2027, which would make Japan the world's third biggest military spender after the United States and China. Defense Minister Minoru Kihara announced in December 2023 a decision to accelerate deployment of some Tomahawks and Japanese-made Type 12 surface-to-ship missiles beginning in fiscal 2025, a year before the original plan. They have rushed and will start delivering Tomahawks, 200 Tomahawks, to Japan by 2024. The government says Japan is facing its severest security environment since World War II because of threats from China and North Korea, causing it to increase military cooperation with the US, Australia, Britain, and other of its allied countries. Each Tomahawk costs around 5,875,000 pesos. How can the Philippines afford 329 million just to buy one Tomahawk? But before we go there, I'm showing you at your right a view of the Typhoon missile system at Lawag International Airport in Lawag, Philippines, September 18, 2024, in this satellite image by Planet Labs Incorporated. Let's listen to this video.
On Thursday, Biden and Kishida are expected to hold a trilateral meeting joined by the Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. And the talks will be focused on defense as well as security. Both the Philippines and Japan are looking to buy more high-tech weapons as regional tensions rise with China. Our defense editor Alex Katopoulos breaks down what the two countries have been buying and why.
An arms race is underway in Asia. Japan and the Philippines are strengthening their armed forces in the face of North Korea's missile tests and China's rise as a regional superpower. In December, Japan announced a $320 billion hike in defense spending, the biggest in more than 80 years. And the shopping list is extensive. Long-range land attack cruise missiles able to destroy targets more than 2,000 kilometers away. More advanced submarines and next-generation fighter jets. It's also looking to turn its helicopter carriers into light aircraft carriers. This would allow F-35 stealth jets to fly missions far from home. Japan is also investing in more Patriot air defense batteries and placing them on islands throughout the archipelago. The Philippines is concerned by China's intimidation tactics in the South China Sea. It's bought 3 batteries of India's BrahMos anti-ship missiles, one of the fastest, most powerful cruise missile in the world, and placed an order for American Harpoon anti-ship missiles as well as HIMARS, or High Mobility Artillery Rocket Systems. Both Japan and the Philippines are now hoping the new weapons, training and strengthening of defense ties with the United States will be enough to deter China from any form of military action in the near future.
So we cannot afford it. Why are we training for it? I can surmise 2 possibilities, maybe 3, but for now 2. The first is, the first 200 and the second 200. Some of it may not land in Japan, but in Philippine territory. Purchased by Japan, delivered to the Philippines. The second possibility is, if you look at this radial map that I'm showing in this slide now, they can deliver to Japan on the northeast. Japan can shoot it instead of going west to China. Japan can shoot the Tomahawk south to the Philippines. The Philippine joystick, run by our armed forces of the Philippines, takes control of the GPS management and bounces it to China. The same can also be done from any Japanese submarine or surface vessel. It can also be launched from Guam. And as it nears the Philippines, our joystick takes over and bounces it to China. This murderous possibility is so staggering that we cannot seem to avoid getting messed up in this war that is not of our own making. Remember what I told you many shows ago? The Americans are more than willing. In fact, they're excited to die, up to the last Filipino. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not joke ourselves in being entertained by Carlson's cartoon. There is such a thing as the doctrine of preemptive attack. According to Professor of Government and Foreign Service at Georgetown University, Anthony Arendt, preemptive attack is the use of military force in advance of a first use of force by the enemy. It is a first strike in anticipation of receiving an attack from an opponent in the near future. The United States has been notorious for using this excuse, for attacking many countries around the world, foremost of which is the attack on Iraq for a fictitious weapons of mass destruction. So it could be as flimsy as a cartoon. And that's why the cartoon discussion could be dangerous, as we made mention earlier. Why? Because while the United Nations Charter Article 50 expressly prohibits the use of military force in international relations with aggressive war declared illegal following the Nuremberg International Military Tribunal, the exception in principle is in the cases of self-defense, which China, which North Korea, and even Russia that has a Pacific presence can invoke. And that's why, as we speak, the placement of the Typhoon weapon system places us in the crosshairs of at least three countries, China, Russia, and North Korea. A state is not obliged to suffer the first blow of an attack before it may be permitted to respond. China, North Korea, and Russia need not wait for the launching of any. If they are threatened with appreciable cost, and this is the map of China's regional missile threats, from 1,000 kilometers to 3,000 kilometers to 5,000 kilometers. It has short range, medium range, and intermediate range ballistic as well as hypersonic launchers according to this. And those are the numbers and the kind of missiles are displayed on the right side. China's numerous and diverse missile arsenal poses a significant threat to U.S. and allied forces in the Indo-Pacific region. But China developed this for self-defense because it considers its front, the land base of China facing the South China Sea, as its soft belly that have been under attack by foreign countries in its 3,000-year history for 475 times. And so it developed this regional missile threats, which is expanded to international threats if necessary. In addition to the selected ballistic cruise and hypersonic glide missiles operated by the People's Liberation and Army Rockets Force, this graphic depicts anti-ship missiles fielded by China's other military services. And so China is prepared to defend itself. And in defense of itself, it can invoke the principle of preemptive attack under an exception from Article 50 of the United Nations Charter. So are we listening here? Are we considering these provocations that the U.S. is making us enforce in the South China Sea, way beyond the justification of our just claims, and confusing us with the asymmetry of claims? They don't tell us that the sovereign rights for our exclusive economic zone cannot protrude the sovereignty rights claims by China unless China itself allows it. And the only way for that is diplomacy, peace talks. None of this provocative incursions of the Philippines that it tested in Escoda Shoal and failed and compromised with the Chinese. Well and good, peace, de-escalation was established. But now it is escalating towards Escoda Shoal. And that is where we see the evil hand of whoever is manipulating it from behind Marcos is leading to. And it will never end. And in fact, they even upped the ante by putting the Typhoon missile system to draw leverage for things that they already know in the 9-line. That is China's red line, non-negotiable, always enforceable through effective control of the entire China Sea. This is what this whole thing is all about. And now on to our last video.
President Putin has signed what he's calling a breakthrough defense pact with North Korea after his first visit to the isolated state in almost a quarter of a century. The agreement says that the two countries will protect each other in the event of what they call foreign aggression. Tonight, President Putin has arrived in Vietnam for talks with the country's communist leaders. Shaima Khalil reports from South Korea.
Vladimir Putin's Pyongyang trip was choreographed to a T, with some surreal made-for-TV moments, like this one of him driving Kim Jong-un on the streets of Pyongyang. Earlier, Kim Il-sung Square at the heart of the North Korean capital was buzzing with crowds and color, as the two globally isolated leaders reveled in each other's company and what Mr. Kim described as a new level of alliance.
We highly appreciate your consistent and unwavering support for Russian policy, including the Ukrainian direction. I mean our fight against the hegemonic imperialist policy imposed for decades by the United States and its satellites.
Since his war on Ukraine, Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un have grown ever closer. Now they've signed a defense agreement that calls for mutual assistance in the event of aggression against either side, a move that will no doubt deepen Washington's anxieties.
I have no doubt that this powerful treaty signed between our two countries will be very constructive and will be a driving force in the creation of a new multinational world, free from domination, hegemony and unilateral authority.
High on Vladimir Putin's priority list is his need for more weapons as the war in Ukraine continues. Russia is desperate to replenish its depleting stockpile, and North Korea can provide that. According to the US and South Korea, it's already been doing so. Moscow and Pyongyang have denied any arms transfers. Kim Jong-un has his own urgent requests. His country, which has been heavily sanctioned for years, is struggling and needs money, fuel, food, and other forms of aid. Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin have been pressured by the West and shunned by the world. They know there are limitations to what their pariah states can realistically offer each other. But for them, this deepening relationship means they haven't yet run out of options. Shaima Khalil, BBC News, Seoul.
North Korea's attention is up north to Japan, to South Korea, and the United States of America in the Pacific. Do we really want North Korea to look south to the Philippines and put us in its crosshairs? Let us be reminded by Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. Question to all Filipinos: are you sure you want to get into a fight where you will be the battleground? Ladies and gentlemen, the casualty in Ukraine may even reach 1 million. Do we want to participate in a proxy war where we will end up in a fight that does not belong to us and where we will be the battleground? You give us the answer. For now, I thank you so much for listening. once again for the next show. Good evening to you all.